When you're using a grid to help you draw, it's usually just easier if you want to grid the whole image to do it in whole inch increments. So here it's 4 inches, there's no leftover spaces at the end. You can do a bigger image, but you're going to have to adjust your grid to more irregular increments for your squares. Or you can just use a grid until it gets to the odd number, and then you just know that that's the leftover strip that you just put into your drawing. This little image is super easy to grid off. It's a 4x4, so you're going to do little ticks on all of the inch markers, and then you just connect them vertically and horizontally, and then there's your grid. So now I have my gridded image. Now I need to grid my paper for my drawing. If you really want it square, like here, I'm just measuring the width of the ruler away from the edge of the paper because it's been mechanically cut. So then it'll be square with at least 2 of the edges. You can also just measure straight across, where if you measured an inch upward from the bottom of the page on both sides and connected that line all the way across, then you're going to get a completely parallel line that's parallel to the machine cut edge, so it's going to be more exact. You can do the same thing with all 4 sides. And again, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. For this example, I'm going to do a 1-to-1 ratio, so I'm going to do it 4x4, just like my reference photo. So this example is going to be a 1-to-2 ratio. So my previous one was a 4x4, just like the reference. This one's going to be an 8x8. This is an easy way to upsize a drawing, especially if you're doing a mural or just a larger drawing than your reference photo. With the size change, I feel like it's more important now that I have the ABCD and the 1, 2, 3, 4, because it really helps me make sure I'm on the correct square. Usually if you have a lot more squares, which will make it easier to translate the drawing, you'll need the numbering and lettering more. It's not that big of a deal on these just 4x4 squares. So when you're using the grid to draw, you're basically just giving yourself less information to process at a time. So look just at what's in that one square when you're drawing it. So really you could draw an entire drawing 1 square at a time, but I personally like to just lay out the whole thing, look at where each of the lines and each of the forms intersects with the different parts of the grid, or with the way that the form intersects with each individual square. So I usually erase out my grid when I'm finished with the drawing, when I'm finished using it as a tool. If you're wanting to go square by square, obviously you're going to need to keep it in there, but I would try and erase out the graphite as soon as possible because you don't want it mixing with colored pencil. Or if you're using graphite, you don't want those lines to mess up your shading. If you're having trouble kind of tuning out the rest of the squares and you are wanting to focus on one square, or you're having trouble drawing one thing, you can make sort of a small viewfinder that functions like a window, so you only see the one square and it just blanks out everything else. Here I'm not being super exact with my measuring, it doesn't really matter, but as long as it just blanks out the rest of the squares and helps you focus, it works fine. So here's an example of me actually using the little viewfinder, and I feel like in this example, especially since we're using colored pencil in class, that it shows, like here with the whipped cream, that it's not actually white. The highlights are white, but really there's like pinks and blues and grays in the shadows you might not have noticed otherwise.